So I watched Richard Dawkins yesterday talk about his existence as a cultural Christian. And he's not just a cultural Christian ethically, he's a cultural Christian scientifically, because the scientific program itself, which is a very particular sort of program and only emerged in the context of a Judeo-Christian society, and that wasn't accidental. It is predicated on a variety of meta-scientific claims. One is that the logos characterizes the cosmos, which means it's intelligible. Also that intelligibility is good, because otherwise the scientist studying the intelligibility of the cosmos could be a terribly destructive force, which is of course something that we're afraid of, and is also true if the aim of the scientist isn't proper, right? And that it is possible for us to exist in a relationship with the cosmos such that its intelligibility will reveal itself to us if we participate in that investigation, both in the spirit of truth, which is core to the scientific enterprise, but also in relationship to our upward aim, because scientists don't ever have to say, we're conducting this research to further the good. That's just axiomatic, but the reason it's axiomatic is because it's nested in this underlying ethos. I mean, you can easily imagine a science that serves totalitarian claims. I don't think it would last long as a science, because it would eat itself, but we've certainly seen that enterprise perverted in directions that take it away from what it is and what it has to be nested in order to be genuine science and to serve psyche and society.
The most incomprehensible fact of the universe is its comprehensibility. That's the Einsteinian thought.
The other thing you need is that the world is not God. So the world has to be intelligible for science to get off the ground, but also it can't be God. If it's God, you're going to worship it, or you'll keep it at a distance. If it's not God, you can experiment, you can analyze, and so on. And both those are contained here. It's radically intelligible, and it's not God. It's been made by God. I think those two things have got to be in place for the sciences to emerge.
Right. That's an interesting point, the idea that you can't be scientific if you worship nature.
No.
We're actually seeing that played out in the academy now, because as the academy decolonizes, there are claims by the decolonizers that the scientific enterprise itself violates the sacred. Right.
Well, this is what's so interesting. From the 19th century onwards, up until relatively recently, maybe 10 years ago, the standard discussion on campuses that you would see a Christian union put on would be religion and science. How are they compatible? How do you reconcile the two? When it's quite clear that the paradigm now, it's really the hard-boiled secularist or the hyper-progressive who is struggling to reconcile the constructive view of reality to the discovered intelligibility of the natural world. So we've seen a huge change here, and I think it unsettles the old materialist paradigm. I think even, I defer to John here, but if you talk to really cutting-edge physicists, they'll be the first to say that matter is a lot more complicated and mysterious than it used to be. And we're starting to see now that structure, relationality, the mapping of relationality through structure, has a lot more heuristic power within the hard sciences than the old sticks and balls physics that you used to learn at school.
I just came from such a conference around Emil Gurker's work, and there was physicists there. And what the science is, at the bottom, you're getting pure relationality, right? And at the top, with relativity, you have pure relationality. And then the scientists are driven by this thing that they can't justify scientifically, but somehow the two theories have to be integrated. They have to be one. And they've been struggling with this for like 50 years. I think part of the problem is they're still bound in a kind of substance metaphysics, even though they're wrestling with this more of a Neoplatonic understanding of reality. Go ahead.
Well, we see also this unconscious porting over of nature worship, that nature's elevated. It's the Rousseauian ideal where nature is elevated above man, right? So it gets out of place if you don't have that separation necessarily. And it's almost this porting over of a notion of original sin that elevates it, that we have in some way that makes us inferior to the thing to be worshipped. If it's not differentiated from God, then we worship nature and hold it higher than us.
And this, I think, is like the first moving into this crazy proposition, which is that this fellow Jesus of Nazareth, that's where it all comes together. But at least at the outset, what we can perceive is that this union, the place where this comes together, is in man, right? Even if we don't come to the person of Jesus yet, we can understand that if the capacity, the consciousness human consciousness in the world that we know is the locus through which all these vectors join together.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted to say. I mean, I'm not making any trespass on the doctrine of the Incarnation, but what I was trying to say, look, these things are incarnated in us. Right. They are not just things we're referring to out in the
They're
world.
embodied.
We understand, we live, like it's like almost like what Paul says in Acts. In these we live and move and have our being. Right. We are participating in them.
But right here it says, right in the text it says, but as many as receive him, to them gave he the power to become sons of God. Right, and so like we'll see how this plays out in the story, but you know that this is already hinted at, right? That this is our role, that this is the role that humans play, are to become sons of God, to become the place where this, you know, the invisible, all of the invisible pattern, love, relationality, all of that come together into this anchor.
So are you saying then
that mediates.
that the microcosm, macrocosm structure is both significant anthropologically and in terms of the theology of the Incarnation?
Of course.
If you had to pick any kind of being in which these patterns of intelligibility could be united, just as a purely secular matter, what kind of being are you going to choose if not human beings?
Again, this is a cutting-edge scientific idea, right? The idea that there's a deep continuity between how life works and how mind works, and we can talk about whatever spirit is. How spirit, this is what people are now talking about. They're taking it seriously, right? And they should, because we've hit this wall in our ontology in which science is making a picture of everything except the scientist, the living scientist who does science. That person doesn't fit in that ontology. That's a whole, right? And we have to invert our epistemology and our ontology so that we can be proper places. We can find a proper home within that again. And I'm trying to, as a non-Christian, I'm trying to see how this text can be relevant to that challenge.